Okay, good afternoon and thank you for joining our webinar on the consequences of remote working. Presenting today, we have myself, Ian Dutton, and my colleague, Michael Green.
Oh.
Okay, so from today's webinar, you'll gain an awareness of the issues facing remote working. You'll have a greater visibility and understanding of the threat landscape. And you'll see how Cyberseer can help you achieve full visibility. In addition, you'll receive either a £25 Just Eat voucher, or you can donate this to the NHS, and that is your choice. What we'll do in relation to questions, if people can just put their questions in the chat, and then we'll answer those questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you. So let's get started. So why is visibility so important? In the wake of COVID-19, we have new breeds of remote workers. Wrong one, sorry. We have had remote workers in the past, and we cater for these remote workers. These are normally field employees or executives, and they're connecting to the resources either in the data center, cloud, or in those SaaS environments. And really, we've been working and planning with these remote workers in mind for the past 10, 15 years. However, with COVID-19, we need to cater for more workers. And how do we go about doing that? Because visibility is important across our entire infrastructure. Okay. And we did have visibility for these existing employees, but how do we actually scale up? Okay. We need to scale out our infrastructure. We need to do it quickly. We need to do it securely. Okay. To allow access for these internal only users, which are now trying to access these resources externally. And so examples of this may be the accounts department. They used to be just office based, and that now they need access to this confidential information, but from these remote locations. By scaling out our infrastructure and applications, we need to ensure that we have the visibility into these new environments. What we normally do, we normally scale out and we cater for these applications. Okay, unfortunately, we've had a reduced time frame to do that, so we need to ensure that we've now got full visibility, because if we use the existing technologies that we used to have going back 6 months ago, we now have partial visibility, and this results in multiple blind spots. So how do we gain full visibility of our entire estate? So what we need to start looking at, we need to start increasing the logging across VPNs and SL VPNs, SaaS environments, catering for these new applications that users are using, and catering for these new users. The result of this is we've now got an increasing number of data feeds to feed in to our SIEMs. We also need to start ingesting east to west traffic within our data center. So all of this gives us more complexity and more data to actually manage. So why is visibility so important now? With users connecting from unsecure home networks, they've got basic ADSL routers, which may run unpatched code. They might have had them for 5, 10 years sat there. There might also be compromised machines on the networks. They could be older, unpatched machines, XP, Windows 7, etc., or IoT devices, and they were never built with security in mind. Then we have the exponential increase in BYO devices. Not every organisation can afford to roll out corporate machines to all of its employees. Many would just choose to work from home and use their own device. Again, this is probably an old device that they don't really use or have not used much in the past. So again, it could be XP, Windows 7, jailbroken devices. In addition, those employees who may have gone out and bought a device just so they could work from home, yes, they might be up to date with Windows 10, but have they patched? Yeah. Do they have endpoint security? Have they been updating their signatures if they've got AV? Okay. So again, we could still have weak or no endpoint security even on modern day devices. And then finally, we have malicious applications that could either knowingly or unknowingly have been installed, either through phishing, etc. So what I want to do now, I just want to pass over to Michael, who is basically going to discuss what we as Cyberseer are currently seeing out there in the wild at the moment. So Michael, if I can hand over to you, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So yeah, over the past couple of months, within our customer base, I guess the top 4 things we've seen issues with, primarily phishing, unauthorized tools, visibility of users, and overall authentication. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk through these in more in depth, and also I think in the background there's some of the screenshots and some of the toolage, the visibility yet through some of the toolage we see. So quickly to get ahead, the first one we have seen a sharp increase in is phishing. Many organizations, including the US Secret Service and the World Health Organization, have all warned of corona-related phishing scams. As always, cyber criminals are looking to exploit the current situation through mass emails, and essentially other times posing as legitimate health organizations, or even posing as your internal HR, or looking to see their internal emails to try and convince users to click on either malicious links, malicious downloads, and essentially too many people comply, leading to compromised logins. So here we see in this screenshot, really, it's just I think the first one was a suspicious link coming in, and then from our tool set, some of the actions we've seen on emails that have arrived into people's inboxes. So on to the next slide, Ian. So the next issue we've seen is an increase in unauthorized tools, or I think it's also called shadow IT, as people are now home based. So essentially, the downloading of applications and the use of non-authorized tools greatly increases your risk for your users. Vulnerabilities that may be introduced that can easily be exploited by attackers out of your control. Take, for example, the remote conferencing tool Zoom. There's been a multitude of news reports over this 3-month period of some cases that have been associated with this tool. I think there's been cases of Zoom bombing, whereby uninvited people are joining meetings that are looking to cause disruption. There's also concerns about the lack of encryption during the calls, especially with more recent articles confirming some specific calls are being routed through mainland China. On to the next slide. So another specific threat we're seeing is as always, it's not entirely new, but you are having to be more vigilant as people are away from the office. And this is to do with visibility of users, and especially with regard to insider threat or accidental data exposure. More than ever, insider threat is possible with employees outside the network, with still having access to sensitive material. Having many new remote workers accessing data outside the perimeter risk that data ended up in the open, especially through the use of cloud file storage and other third-party services. This data is not limited to customer records, credentials, codes, and other IP and other sensitive information critical to the company. In the screenshot here, apologies. In the screenshot previously, there was an alert we had seen from one of our customer environments where a user had been actually looking to mass download data from an internal SharePoint. To the next slide, please. Okay. And finally, a general one really is authentications. So we've seen a lot of issues with authentication. A common scenario being a known individual may be attempting to connect to the network, but it becomes a lot harder to determine is that person who they claim to be. Touching back to the first risk mentioned, phishing, the risk of unauthorized access from remote locations due to compromised logins is significantly increased. Essentially, how do you determine who is the person your employee? Is that the person sitting at their computer and logging in, or have those credentials been compromised? Here in the screenshot, we have an example of tooling whereby you can see first-time activity from an unknown country for this specific user. And essentially first-time access is from this country. Another one with authentication is also with regards to those who have been furloughed. Besides shutting down their account access, is it possible to still be able to monitor their activity whilst they are not meant to be working? Thank you.
Okay, cheers for that, Michael. Okay, so why do you need full visibility? Okay, you need to protect your organization against multiple risks. Okay. You need to ensure compliance, especially around furloughed users. These users shouldn't be logging into your systems and working. So we need to understand who's actually trying to work and who shouldn't actually be working. Data loss prevention. How do we proactively prevent data loss across our entire estate? We need visibility of SaaS and cloud environments. Data is now being held in these environments, so we need to have visibility of these. How do we know if data within those environments is being exfiltrated? Moving on to insider threats. Most companies don't have visibility into what users are doing. And they can't detect anomalies for a particular user. Yeah. Employees are now deemed to be trusted. Okay, unfortunately, this is not the case in a small majority of the cases. It may be malicious insider, or it may be, as we've seen before, somebody who's actually had a phishing email. They've clicked on that link. They've then put their credentials in. So it's just an unfortunate user who's clicked on that and had their credentials stolen. Okay. So again, how do we detect these types of threats? Then, if we look at third-party security suppliers, again, how do we're securing our infrastructure, but how do we know if they're securing their infrastructure? How do we know that they've not been compromised? Also, with email being more prevalent now, everybody's at home, and so CEOs are more inclined to do a lot more emails than they would face-to-face meetings. Okay, and so spear phishing is out there targeting those CEOs directly, trying to get their credentials so that they can actually have privileged user access. And then finally, ransomware. We don't want corporate information being encrypted, and we need to pay to unencrypt it. And we also don't want that ransomware spreading across our infrastructure. So here's an example of one of our customers and how they benefited from visualization. Okay. They came to us, they had a number of challenges. Okay. They didn't have any visibility across their on-prem, their cloud, or their SaaS environment, so they were completely blind. Okay. They also knew that actually if they gained visibility into their estate, that they'd be overwhelmed by the actual amount of alerts generated, all this log data ingested. It triggered an awful lot of alerts. So how could they effectively triage those and ensure that they were looking at the right alerts and the right incidents, or were they just looking at the noise? So they wanted to reduce the amount of heavy lifting, and they wanted some threat intel and context about what those users were doing, so they could actually try and eliminate those false positives and go straight onto the priority incidents. So we took those challenges on board and we turned that around. and now they have global visibility across their entire estate, whether that be on-prem, in the cloud, multi-cloud, or SaaS. Okay, we remove the heavy lifting, so everything comes into Cyberseer, and we'll talk about Aspect later, but we'll actually put more threat intel around that, and we can actually triage those and just highlight the priority incidents so that their team can then deal with those actual incidents and not go down wild goose chases. So they've now got the intelligence to make quicker and more efficient judgments. Okay, so how do we spot these instances? So basically, we've got an automation engine called Aspect. What Aspect's allowing us to do is we can use a multitude of rich data sources, whether that be from network devices, servers, cloud, or SaaS services. And basically, that's going to be ingested into either Exabeam or Darktrace. Then from that, we'll then run AI on that intelligence. Okay, and from that, we'll determine risky behavior across our whole environment. And once we've got a list of the risky behavior, we'll then feed that into Aspect, and we'll enrich that. We'll enrich it with threat intel feeds, and this results in removing the majority of the noise, and it allows us then to concentrate on the key alerts. That then goes into our analysts, who will then actually look at the context, look to see actually, is it a credible alert, or have we seen this before, or is it nothing to worry about? Only then is it then passed on to your SOC team. So we're not going to give you any noise. What we're going to give you, we're going to give you the incidents which we deem as incidents. Okay, so they're going to investigate each one, and only then will we pass that as an incident 24/7 over to your team. As well as providing those incidents, we'll provide you with weekly and monthly reports about what's being detected, what alerts we've seen, etc. So by using these technologies, Exabeam and Darktrace, with Aspect, and combining our analysts, we're improving the accuracy, as well as improving response times and improving the resource efficiency of your team. So using us as your managed security service, we can provide you with full visibility across all of your environments through automated monitoring, which allows us to detect and manage threats early in the actual life cycle. This reduces the amount of dwell time, and we can actually take that from months, and in some cases get it down to minutes. We've made the investment in Aspects in our analysts, so you don't have to. We've got the highly trained people, so you don't have to have as many skilled people as you would if you didn't have Cyberseer as a managed security service. So in conclusion, there are a multitude of risks associated with your new remote workforce, from new departments, new applications and services, through to new devices accessing those services. We're seeing a mixture of old and new style attacks targeting new remote workforce, okay? Whether these be phishing attacks, spear phishing attacks, malware, unauthorized tools. And then finally, full visibility is critical in understanding the current changing threats, okay? And what's happening in your network. So thank you, and do we have any questions? I'll go to the chat. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. How do you differentiate between a corporate device and a BYOD device? So basically, within theme, we can actually detect what devices are accessing our network, what devices are trusted, and what devices are untrusted. We've also got MDM, and we can use BitGlass as well to actually look at in depth what devices those are. Okay, another question is, can you ingest external threat intel and vulnerability management data? So we can do that using our aspect service. So basically what we're doing is we're taking additional threat intel feeds out there and combining it with the feeds that we actually get from Exabeam and Darktrace. Okay, another question is, I talked about artificial intelligence. Would you be able to elaborate on how your intelligence is developed? Okay, so intelligence is, there are two ways that we can do this, depending on which technology we're using. If we're looking at Exabeam, with Exabeam, what we're actually doing, we're looking at users, okay, and we got user entity and behavioral analytics. And basically what we do is we stitch the whole session together. So over time, it baselines what a normal user does. So you put it into learning mode, it would baseline and look at what a normal user does. It also looks at what groups that user is a member of and baselines the whole of that group. So with Exabeam, what we can then do is we can actually detect any anomalies through AI and machine learning. Okay. And what that allows us to do, that allows us to granularly go into each user, and basically rather than a normal alert, you would get an alert which would go into a notable user, and only when that score goes above 90, you would then get an alert for that particular user. So an example might be that this user has never been to a particular website. However, they now go to a particular website and they're uploading and exfiltrating data. We can actually detect that and respond to that. However, that would be flagged up in Exabeam system, and from Exabeam it then be ported over to Aspect, and then we put threat intel feeds into that, and from those threat intel feeds we could actually determine that actually Joe Bloggs, yes, he's doing something which is an anomaly to him. However, what he's doing is actually not malicious. Okay. So as part of the whole AI, we can actually detect, and then we can actually just add that human context at the end. The same is true of Darktrace. With Darktrace, what we're doing, we're taking feeds in, and again, we're baselining that and looking to see and detect anomalies. Right, okay, and we have another question. Can you actively block devices or put them into quarantine? So again, what we're going to be doing here is, if we look at the likes of Antigena from Darktrace, we can actually quarantine those devices. We could actually resume a business as normal if we had a machine which was in the network, and all of a sudden we spotted that there was an anomaly on there and it was talking out to a command and control center. What we could actually do is we could actually kill the connection to that command and control center, allow that machine to carry on as usual. Okay. And then we could have a downtime window, and then in that downtime window, then we could take and reflash the image on that machine. So question, how long did it take to create a baseline? To create a baseline, you're looking 4 to 6 weeks to actually create a baseline of your users in an infrastructure. Okay, the log retention, okay, and another question, getting lots of questions here, and what's the log retention timeframe on the Exabeam data lake by default? So from memory, I think it's 180 days, but I can just check that for you. Okay. Just making sure that I've not missed any questions. Okay, thank you. I've just been informed that there are no more questions. So thank you very much for your time. If there are any questions going forward, please don't hesitate to send myself or Michael or any of the individuals at Cyberseer an email or give us a phone call, and we'll go through those questions in more detail. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.